Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware, and we are on Shaky Cam today because it actually looks like I'm going to be running up to a nearby town to pick up a PC that I'm purchasing for about 250 USD, and this is actually an older AMD system, but it comes with a monitor, comes with a keyboard, has an SSD in it, has a decent amount of RAM, so provided that it all shapes out okay, it should be a decent value. So let's hop in the car, I suppose, and go ahead and run out to town so I can pick this thing up and get it back into the studio here so I can test it out and see if it's really even worth the money I'm paying for it. Okay, so this is the PC right here, and it is a one of these older Cooler Master cases that has the giant 200mm fan on top. And we actually have one of those nice features about some of these older cases. We actually have a couple of hot swap hard drive bays here as well. But before I do anything, I do want to make sure this thing is actually going to post. So I have everything plugged in, HDMI and the display. So, okay, that's a good sign. See if we get a image. Okay, so we have a post. See if there's any sort of operating system. I did see 16 gigs of RAM, and it is booting into Windows. Now, I'm on a completely just fresh install Windows over this, though it does say it has a Windows 10 home license, so that'll be the Windows I'll be going with this particular operating system. And actually, it looks like it's been completely freshly installed. So this thing booted right up. It's a 250-ish gigabyte SSD. It might be a 240 gig or something like that. It's a SATA SSD, but it was listed at 250 gigs. So now that we know the thing works, and it is a little bit loud on the fan here. It's a little bit louder than it needs to be, but that's okay. Now that it works, we are gonna break out these panels here and actually not really break out so much as just remove them and take a look on the inside because I'm sure this thing is quite dusty. Okay, so now we are on the inside of this particular PC, and the first thing to point out for those of you that noticed this right off the bat, the RAM is not installed in the most optimal way. Obviously, this is going to be running single channel, doing it this way, so you want to go every other slot. So I'm probably going to just go ahead and hopefully this clip doesn't break on me since the motherboard is a little bit older. I'll pull that out. Let's see if we can get this seated one-handed here. Ooh, that is not one to go in very easily there, but there we go. Now we have dual channel memory, and these are both 8 gigabyte sticks, so this is actually really good. We have 16 gigs of DDR3 memory. It was listed at 1600 megahertz. We have this stock cooler for the FX8320. This cooler is not great. Obviously, it's better than some of the stock coolers that do come with AMD CPUs, but it's definitely not great. It's probably going to be a little bit on the noisy side, so I'm definitely not going to be overclocking the 8320, at least with this particular cooler. Now, the GPU is actually a decent one, at least for the price of the system. It's an R7 370, but it's a 4 gigabyte GPU, so it actually should be able to handle pretty much most modern titles. Add knockdown settings, you might have to go, 900p or things like that, but should actually be okay. But the crown jewel of this build is actually this motherboard, and this is the Sabertooth 990FX. I actually have one sitting right there. And this motherboard actually still goes for like $160 on eBay regularly, like $160, $170. So this motherboard is like the top of the line for the FX lineup, or one of the top motherboards from that series. It has excellent VRM cooling. These things are just chunky heat sinks. It's got good power delivery in general, so this thing is going to be able to run an 8320 just fine. You could actually probably get a pretty good overclock on that 8320, maybe even with the stock cooler keeping those voltages in check. Really, that's pretty much it, other than to mention that there are two little fans up here. I'll spin around. There's a couple fans here that are bringing in air through the front mesh. So what we have here with this configuration is we have some intake. We have this big exhaust fan, the 200mm exhaust fan, and then we have another red exhaust fan at the back. So we actually should have really good airflow. The only concern I have with that exhaust fan up top is that it's getting rid of air before it ever actually crosses over the VRMs here, but I really think that's not going to be a big issue with this system. It needs dusted out. It's clearly quite dusty, especially if you come down on this side here. Can't really see back in there. Let me crank my ISO a little bit here. Basically, it is pretty dusty down in there, so I'll get my duster and blow all that out. But yeah, it's actually a decent build. The power supply is a 550 watt power supply from Intermax, so it should be decent for this build. And yeah, it's actually not a build, so I'm gonna actually put my test bench SSD on this thing and see if I can run or at least boot into a couple of games. So as expected here, I'm waiting on Borderlands 3, the benchmark, to load up, but as expected, this thing is a jet engine right now, and part of the problem, I'm sure, is that the thermal paste just needs to be replaced on it, but the thing is insanely loud for a little cooler, so I have enough coolers around, it might actually just get completely replaced before I turn around and try to sell this thing. And it looks like my benchmark is just about to start here. Let's see if we can get it to focus a little bit. Focus. Panasonic, focus. Okay, so it looks like we're running in the low 30 FPS range, and this is on medium at 1080p for Borderlands 3, so this is actually a title here that could be run by this PC just as it was. Now, obviously, the nice thing here, this GPU can easily be upgraded with this system. Man, it feels like I'm talking just with a huge fan going by me. Hopefully that doesn't come through on the microphone too much. But this GPU could be easily replaced because the power supply itself is actually a pretty solid one. On the 12-volt rail, it runs almost 500 watts, or at least it's rated for just shy of 500 watts on the 550-watt power supply. So this should actually be an easy upgrade if somebody wanted to drop in a stronger GPU. The CPU with a better cooler could get a really strong overclock on it. So running in the low 30s here for Borderlands is actually not too shabby, and if we got onto esports titles like maybe Fortnite, this PC would actually be a really great entry-level PC if you're wanting to run something like Fortnite or maybe Valorant, those types of titles. This PC is going to do great with those. And as expected here, the thermal paste is part of the problem. This stuff is just in terrible shape. No telling how long it's been just basically baking on top of that CPU. So I'm going to clean this up, and I'm going to try this cooler with better thermal paste on it, or at least new thermal paste on it, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't, then I guess I'll try a different cooler altogether. But the cooler itself at stock should actually be able to handle the 8320 okay. Hopefully the thermal paste issue was the biggest part of the problem, but we'll see once I actually get it swapped out. Alright, so that fan is still pretty loud even after swapping out the thermal paste, so I will figure out something else for that CPU. Actually, I may just go with the one that I have right now on my other Sabertooth motherboard, but that's basically this little PC. Now, I am going to be doing full benchmarks on this thing when I actually finish getting it cleaned up and everything, get it into its final form, probably with a different CPU cooler, and get the fans tuned so it's not quite as noisy. But this was a $250 PC, and if it was just for the tower, that's probably a little bit more than I would like to pay, except that this came with a membrane keyboard, it came with one of those old Rat 3 gaming mice, and it also came with a display. So this is actually a $250 full setup that I got for, well, $250. And the biggest thing behind me getting this was nice case, really nice motherboard for the generation, and a solid power supply as well. So I'm hoping to get everything switched up, cable managed a little bit, make a couple alterations to the hardware, and this thing should actually be in good shape moving forward once I get those little adjustments taken care of. So that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think about this PC. I know this is sort of a more of an offhand video, a little bit less composed than normal, but hey, I wanted to give you a quick look at this thing because I was kind of excited to get it in-house and take a look at it. So if you like the video, give it a like, share, subscribe, and comment. All those things are helpful to the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.